Commanding General of the United States Army Europe, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. General Hodges was here in Ukraine for several days and held meetings with the Ukrainian counterparts discussing security and defense relations with Ukraine. So we're very happy to have you here, General. So the floor is yours.
So, Vasil, thank you very much. And thanks for all of you for coming out this afternoon. This visit to Ukraine was for the purpose of visiting the training in Yavoriv at the International Peacekeeping and Security Center. We have American soldiers from U.S. Army Europe that are here to conduct training with soldiers from the Ukrainian National Guard. So I visited the training yesterday for the purpose of evaluating the training and making sure that we are providing the best possible training for the Ukrainian National Guard and to see if it was necessary, should we make any adjustments, because there will be 2 more rotations of Ukrainian National Guard to receive training before the end of the year. Very happy with what I saw, impressed with the quality of the training, and also very impressed with the exchange of experiences between Ukrainian National Guard and the American soldiers. So many of the Ukrainian National Guard are veterans from the ATO, and our soldiers were learning a lot from them as well. So a positive professional relationship between the Ukrainian National Guard and the American soldiers. I would also like to mention before I take your questions that I was impressed and want to congratulate Ukrainian armed forces and the government for the way that you've handled the situation with the 2 captured Russian soldiers. The immediate notification to OSCE, the immediate notification to the Red Cross, the getting the soldiers to a hospital for medical treatment, I think is another good example of the professional conduct and the way Ukrainian governance is working. So I look forward to your questions.
Michael Steckel, Radio Liberty. I'd like to ask you about these 2 captured combatants, which SBU claims to be units of Russian Spetsnaz. They said that about 220 people from their brigade came to Ukraine at the beginning of April, as I remember. It's about 1 battalion of Spetsnaz. How do you think, which could be their combat tasks? What could they do with such impressive power force? There were 1 battalion, 3 companies, 4 groups each. Thank you.
Well, I think I would defer to the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian armed services to comment on any specifics about what kind of Russian forces may have come in. They would be the appropriate ones to answer that. But I will say that this points out the importance of the OSCE being allowed to conduct the monitoring mission that it was given, that all parties to the Minsk agreement concurred that OSCE would be allowed to do monitoring so that we could have transparency. And this just reinforces the need for that, the full access for OSCE.
Thank you.
My question from Chinese television Phoenix. I would like to ask you about yesterday's decision of Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, which recognizes the possibility that Ukraine will have the perspective to join NATO. What your assessment or your comment on this decision? And another question: what most important information for you from Ukrainian soldiers in Yavori? What you get actually from them? What more valuable for you?
Well, as regards NATO, it's the most successful alliance in the history of the world. It exists for collective security of its members. So any decisions and there is a process if a nation wanted to apply to join the alliance, and then there's a long process for that accession into the alliance. So I would defer to Ukrainian government and to NATO to comment on whether or not where that is in the process. I was very impressed with the Ukrainian soldiers, both from the Army and from the National Guard that I met yesterday. Disciplined, committed. Several of them had multiple deployments to the ATO, so they were very experienced. Very fast learners to pick up new ideas, technology. And I think what my soldiers, particularly my sergeants, were impressed with was the quality of the Ukrainians. At the same time, I think that the Ukrainians also saw that U.S. Army sergeants and officers are very disciplined, are very adaptive, and so it made for a good combination to provide best quality training.
Vitaly Sayenko, News Agency Union. You already said that you impressed by Ukrainian soldiers, but my question kind of different. In your opinion, what do you think Ukrainian military need to improve military capabilities in order we can much more better defend our territorial integrity in the face of Russian aggression on the east of the country?
Well, one of the things that I have seen both from the National Guard and from the Army is a determination to invest in the long-term institutional strength of the security forces, training centers, education. So this is a long-term view to professionalism, to send officers to school and to look for opportunities to train with other nations. So that's to me is one of the most important things, is the recognition of the requirement to invest in long-term training and education, to have the necessary institutional base to continue to provide the best possible security for the Ukrainian people. And I think that's exactly the right track to be on.
General Hodges, I have a question. According to the information which you have, what is the likelihood of the further escalation of the conflict in the east, and and do you think it may actually evolve into a full-blown, full-fledged war?
Well, everybody that I know, everybody that wears a uniform, wants to see the successful implementation of the Minsk Agreement. That we would want to see all parties adhere to the agreement to which they agreed, into the successful implementation. The monitoring by OSCE is essential. I would say on the what I have heard reported by Ambassador Baer and the OSCE is on the Ukrainian side of the line of contact, it's almost complete transparency. Some places could improve, but almost complete transparency. Unfortunately, on the other side, of the Russian-led separatist side, there are large areas where we do not have monitoring by OSCE. That makes it difficult to have the confidence we all would like to have. The alliance has got to stick together. The EU has got to stick together. And I think the leadership by the Bundeskanzler, Merkel, has been very important here to maintain the pressure on the situation so that we can have successful implementation of the Minsk Agreement. So I wouldn't speculate on if there's going to be another attack or resumption. I certainly hope not. I think the Ukrainian people have suffered enough casualties But it is important to remember that there's as an aggressor and there's a victim, that this started with illegal occupation of Crimea.
Nolan Peterson from the Daily Signal in DC. I was just out in Yavoriv to see the training, and I know it's hundreds of miles from the front line. If the war did kick off again, and there was a large-scale combined Russian separatist offensive, would there be any plans to pull U.S. troops out of Ukraine early?
Hey, Norm, I wouldn't speculate on any contingency plans or talk about those. That'd be inappropriate. I am very confident in the quality capabilities of what Ukraine is doing right now, and what our soldiers are focused on, the training mission that they have with the Ukrainian National Guard at the Yavoriv Training Center.
One more question, please. Maybe you have some information about providing a lethal weapon to Ukraine by the United States, because as I know, a few days ago Congress had approved another decision about concerning this issue. Maybe you have some information about that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the policy of the United States is still the policy of the United States. It's to help Ukraine in ways with equipment, with training, education, and I think that's going to continue to be our policy until I hear something different from the government.
And a more specific question on the satellite images exchange between NATO and Ukraine, because was it discussed during these meetings, and is Ukraine getting any of this most updated images from the satellite?
I would not be willing to talk about anything I might have discussed with Ukrainian military leadership.
Do we still have time for more questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
I want to ask you about the increasing of activity of Russian forces around Europe, actually, not only in Ukraine, but around Europe, near the border of Baltic states, in this Mediterranean. What actually American forces in Europe will do with this problem?
Well, the Wales summit, less than a year ago, 28 nations agreed that Russia's occupation of the Crimea was illegal. And so all 28 nations agreed that that was unacceptable behavior in the 21st century to use force to change the internationally recognized sovereign border of a European country. So coming out of Wales, the members of the alliance agreed that they needed to provide assurance to those allies that are closest on the eastern part of NATO, and also that the alliance needed to adapt to make sure that we had responsive forces that could provide deterrence and show capabilities. So that means a significant increase in the number of exercises, which you will have seen all the way from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, in NATO countries where allies were invited to participate in exercises. I think already 25 different exercises, at least this year, that are multinational, battalion size or larger. That activity, I think, will continue until the alliance decides otherwise. The adaptation, you're familiar with some of those things. The creation of the NATO force integration units in the countries along the eastern side of NATO. The creation of a very high readiness joint task force. These things are well underway, and so I think our alliance, really in less than a year, is already demonstrating, beginning to deliver on everything that it promised at the Wales Summit. I think that's impressive. And that is the best way to ensure we keep peace in Europe, is the alliance stays together and the EU stays together.
It was reported that in a few years Ukrainian army could cooperate with Euro-Union army forces, which gonna rotate in 2016, as I remember. And there was information by defense experts that Ukrainian transport planes could cooperate somehow with armies of Poland and Czech Republic, which gonna be the next European Union armies since 2016. Do you have any information on that issue? As I understand, you cooperate with these forces.
I don't know what Ukraine may have offered to the EU or to anybody else, but remember, ever since Ukraine became a part of the Partnership for Peace, we have been doing exercises. The U.S., other countries have been doing exercises with Ukraine, building their capacity. We've gone to Iraq together, Afghanistan together. Ukraine has soldiers in Kosovo. So it is a normal thing for partners and allies to train together, to work together. But I would not know any specifics about whether or not Ukraine has offered aircraft for EU.
General Hodges, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and thank you for coming here and briefing us, and have a safe trip back home.
Great. Thanks to all of you for what you're doing. It's very, very important for free and democratic people to be able to help educate and explain. So thanks for the opportunity.